13 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few tight ends I would start this week. The first guy, Logan Thomas of the Washington football team. So he came off injured reserve on Monday Night Football versus the Seattle Seahawks, and he had a decent game in terms of running and moving fluidly. 3 catches, 31 yards in that one, but he did have a touchdown called back in his return, was Thomas. But this week, here in Week 13, he's got a great matchup up paper at the Las Vegas Raiders that give up the second most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. We just saw Dalton Schultz last week at the Raiders score a touchdown for the Dallas Cowboys. And right here, he's a big target. He's a good tight end. We saw last season with him have one of the better seasons for tight ends in fantasy football. And this week at the Raiders, I think he could get 40 or 50 yards and find the end zone. So he's a tight end that would start this week. The next Pat Freiermuth of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Freiermuth, who here got a late concussion in that ball game after they got blown out versus the Cincinnati Bengals. But Freiermuth's been a hot pickup over the last few weeks, and he's definitely contributing for fantasy owners and the Steelers. Week 10 versus Detroit, 5 catches, 31 yards, a fumble loss. Week 11 at the Chargers, 4 catches, 11 yards, and a touchdown. And Week 12 at Cincinnati, 4 catches, 40 yards, and a TD. So Freiermuth can't go in this game. Obviously, you got to go somewhere else at the tight end position. But if he does play, he's definitely a tight end that would start here. Baltimore Ravens, that give up the 5th most fantasy points to tight ends on the season. So Freiermuth is a go. He's a must start at the tight end position. And I think he could reach double-digit fantasy points once again in PPR leagues if he's going to play this week. The next tight end is Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills. So Dawson Knox, he came back a couple weeks ago after breaking the hand. And I know he's got a very tough matchup Monday Night Football versus the Patriots. I give up the least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. But right now, him and Stephon Diggs, they're the only really 2 big guys on that Buffalo Bill offense. Emmanuel Sanders isn't doing much receiving the football. Cole Beasley's got 1 great game, 1 bad game. He's not consistent. And right now, Dawson Knox, the last few weeks, he's picked it up. Week 11 versus Indianapolis, 6 catches, 80 yards. Week 12 at the New Orleans Saints, 3 catches, 32 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he's a big red zone target. We saw early in the year he had 5 touchdowns in a 3-game span. And this week here versus New England, he's only got to get 20 or 30 yards and find the end zone. And that's still a very solid game for a tight end this week in fantasy football. The next tight end is Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. So last week, I recommended him as a start, was Goedert versus the New York Giants. And he put in a total dud performance. But this week here, Week 13 at the New York Jets, I think he bounces back and has a big ball game. Jalen Hurts in this offense, they got to get back to the basics. They just got to make the smart plays and the easy plays. And they just didn't do that versus the Giants. He was eyeing down his receivers and got hurt too much in that ball game. That's what led to 3 interceptions. So the last few games here for Goedert, Week 10 at Denver, 2 catches, 28 yards. Week 11 versus the Saints, 5 catches, 62 yards. And then last week, he put in a dud versus the Giants, 1 catch in that one. So right here, Week 13, I think the Eagles get right in a good ball game at the New York Jets. And the Jets can't stop anyone. So Goedert bounces back this week with a good one. In the 5th and final tight end I would start this week, Dalton Schultz of the Dallas Cowboys. So Dalton Schultz had a 32-yard touchdown versus the Vegas Raiders on Thanksgiving Day. In the 2 weeks here, Dalton Schultz has played good football, especially with Cooper and CeeDee Lamb out of action. Week 10 versus Atlanta, 1 catch, 14 yards. Week 11 at the Chiefs, 6 catches, 53 yards. And last week versus the Raiders, 3 catches, 46 yards, and a touchdown in a 2-point conversion. And he had another touchdown called back as well. Well, that would have been a monster fantasy day. So this week here, Thursday Night Football, Week 13 at the Saints, I think Schultz can make plays. CeeDee Lamb and Cooper are supposedly going to be back for this game. But right here, Schultz is going to have one-on-one coverage with linebackers, obviously, or zone where it's going to be open in the middle. So Schultz here, I think he's at least good for 50 or 60 yards with 4 or 5 catches and possibly find the end zone. So that's a few tight ends I would start here for Week 13 of the fantasy football season.